All right, how's it going, everyone? So I want to give a quick overview of why it's important to design your applications for accessibility, right? So there's a minority population who are browsing the internet who have no vision or they have impaired vision. So for them to actually visually look at your UI and find buttons, their experience is going to be a lot different from yours. So it's good to kind of make your applications accessible. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to actually turn on what we call voiceover on your computer and navigate through your app. If you can navigate through your application as a visioned user, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for an unvisioned user, because I think their abilities to use voiceover are like at a completely different level than what us developers would be using. But at the very least, it's good to just test your application and make sure that someone can tab through and get some extra information about like what they're about to click on. You can also close your eyes or like put a blindfold on or turn your brightness down and try to navigate through your application to see if you can actually understand like what's going on. And maybe we'll try that. So to turn on voiceover on Mac, you do an fin function keyword, you do command and F5, and that's gonna bring up a voiceover. So that's gonna start reading off the things that your application is focused on, right? So in this case, if I were to double click your classrooms, it says classroom selected. And now when I click tab, it'll start reading off all the different focusable elements such as buttons, inputs, checkboxes, etc., that a user is focused on. So if I click tab, it should say create a class button. If I click it again, if you look at the page, where do you think it's going to take the user, right? It's going to take them to the next focusable thing, which happens to be the manage classroom button. So if I click it, it says manage classroom button, list 3 items. Now, if you were to have your eyes closed, you'd have absolutely no idea what manage classroom button does, because there's 3 of them on the page. You have no context of like, if I click enter right now, what classroom is going to take me into? Is it this one, or this one? So it's important to like make sure you set up correct ARIA labels and make sure your code is structured in a way that like gives a blind user some extra information, can help guide them through your application. The first thing I think would be really useful, and I actually have a coworker who has a friend who uses a screen reader all the time, and she personally likes it so when you have a bunch of cards on a page, you can actually focus on each card and have it read off like an overview of what the card's about to give you. Now, I want to say I'm not an accessibility expert, so some of the things I'm teaching might be wrong, and correct me if I say anything wrong. I'm still trying to learn more about accessibility and stuff. But what you can do is on the cards themselves, you can add a tab index. So I have tab index of 0 here, and I have an ARIA label. If I go ahead and uncomment tab index of 0 and go back to the app, you'll see that I can actually tab to the card and you'll see an outline. But notice that it says a student in 2 more items group. So the information you get back when you hover over these cards, again, is not really useful. But the thing I want to point out is that there's a blue outline. This is kind of default into the browser. Like, don't ever add styles to your application that removes this outline, because this is super important for someone who's using a screen reader to know what they're focused on. All right, because people using a screen reader aren't necessarily always blind. They could just have impaired vision, and they could still see that outline if their vision is not like completely blind, but still to have like, you know, some type of vision. So keep the outlines on your elements. I know it looks weird as you're like clicking things that have this blue outline, but I think it's important to keep it on. So like I said, like when you hover over the cards, it gives you some like bogus text that's not really useful. So what you can also do is on your code, you can add an ARIA label and give a custom string to have the screen reader read out. So I'm gonna go ahead and uncomment this and we're gonna save it. And by the way, when this thing's reading and you want it to stop, just click control if you're on Mac and it'll stop reading. So let's try it again. Let's just go ahead and get focus on this button here. All right, and now when I hover over the next card, notice that it's going to read out list item, and then it's going to read out JavaScript classroom exclamation mark, and then it should say group. So now if your eyes are closed and it says list 3 items JavaScript classroom group, you know that you're currently on like a list of things. There's 3 of them. I'm currently selected on a classroom a JavaScript classroom thing. I guess technically you could put like a card if you want to be more descriptive of what they're looking at. But really it's just a group, right? So as you go through, so this is a test group, what is up group. Now you get more information for the user and they can actually know like what are they focusing on, right? And then if you go at if you go down to the button, it says manage classroom button. Again, like you could add more text to this button if you wanted to. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. It really depends. If, you know, walk through the application with your eyes closed. I will say maybe it would be useful to either have like a labeled by and have this button point to like manage JavaScript classroom button. So, I mean, we could do that too. Let's go down to the button, which I believe is here. And we're going to go ahead and just put a ARIA label here. And in the label, we're going to say manage, and then I'll say classroom.title. So now when someone focuses on the button, it actually tells you like, what is the button doing? It's going to manage the JavaScript classroom, and it's going to say it's a button, right? So I know I can click it and it's going to do something. I could also make this a link and do something similar. I think there's another one called like label by or labeled by, and you can point that to other elements that have IDs if you want this to read off some text that was inside like another ID or something. But for the most part, we're just going to do an ARIA label here. And let's go back to the UI and see if it kind of gives us more information if we're to close our eyes and step through like what we want. All right, let me turn it up a little bit. You get the full experience of this voiceover.
Open use create a class button. List classroom. Manage.
Like I said, manage undefined. So I have something wrong. Let me go back to, I think it's called classroom name. I don't know why it didn't complain about that because I have TypeScript set up. Oh, this is not even typed. Make sure you type your stuff. I had title here before, which is not even proper. It should be named. All right, so let's try it again. Turn voiceover on and I'll show you what happens. Okay, so let's close our eyes and just click through and see if we can kind of understand or visually, visualize what's happening. So click it. All right, so it said manage JavaScript classroom button, JavaScript classroom group. Again, there might be better ways to do this. Again, I'm still trying to learn. I'm trying to get better. It seems kind of redundant that it listed out all that stuff. In fact, I think what we could do is just, if we just put an ARIA label on here that said manage classroom, I think it would say the group that was belonging to.
Classroom.
So let's try it again real quick. It says manage classroom button, comma, JavaScript classroom group. So I know it's a button that's inside the JavaScript classroom group, and I have that extra context. So I know if I were to hit enter here, it's going to be taking me to the page that is for managing this JavaScript classroom card.
List.
So keep that in mind. It's really important to make sure that if you can walk through your application with your eyes closed and still like be able to have it be usable, right? Have it be accessible. The other thing I want to kind of point out is there's actually a lot of shortcuts that people who use screen readers use to navigate your app. One of them is by jumping around through headings. So in this case, I only have one heading on this application, which is the Your Classroom heading. And as a user, if I wanted to jump around and kind of rotate through these, I can do a Control Option Command and press H, and that'll take me through the headings. In this case, this is not a heading right here. These JavaScript classrooms, these bolds, these are not headings. And I want to show you why you might want to make them headings. All right, so notice if I hold down these buttons and I hit Control Option Command H, it takes me to the first heading.
Last heading. Well, first heading, last heading.
But I only happen to have one on the page, right? So it just takes me to this one. But if you're a power user of screen readers, you might want to jump straight to these other headings so you can quickly go and have it read off what the description is, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my code. I'm going to change this to an H2. Let me just refresh the page real quick. So now if I do that same command, so Control Option H, so notice it takes me to the headings, and as a power user, I can like navigate through these different cards and go straight to the headings of what the cards kind of describe. Now, secondly, I can do Control Option right arrow or left arrow and dive to the text, right? So I can also do this and have it read out the text. Okay, so if these cards actually had real information, like I could have that read out to me. So, I mean, that's kind of a quick little overview of VoiceOver. You want to go and probably read up whatever your operating system is and what the default VoiceOver keys are. But when you're building pages, you want to make sure that you're making sure everything's accessible, right? Some countries actually have laws about this, and you can actually be sued. Your company could be sued for a decent amount of money if your site is not accessible by everyone who needs to use it. Especially if you're working on like government projects, if you're working in the public sector and you need to build sites that are used by people who have potential disabilities, it's really important that you follow these because you can get in trouble as well if you don't follow these accessibility rules. Now, I don't know all the laws, I don't know the names and the codes of these laws, so you might want to read up on those. But as a user, it's good to make sure that you're helping out the people who still need to be able to function in society and use these websites and these web applications we build, but you have to give them some additional assistance because they might not be able to see what you're. And even outside the ranges of accessibility, it's nice to be able to just quickly tab through your application as a developer, right? If you can like set up your application where I can easily tab and shift tab through things, you can actually get really good at navigating through your app and not have to use like your mouse all the time. So it's kind of a benefit for yourself as well. But yeah, I hope this was a cool overview. Hope I taught you a little bit. Just wanted to stress the importance of accessibility and how to kind of make sure your application is set up in a better way. But again, like further your knowledge, learn more about it, and leave me a comment if you have any resources that I should read to get better at accessibility. All right, join my Discord if you want to talk to me directly or get help with whatever you might be stuck on. And also have a good day and happy coding.